She was sued, and the judge was her ex-husband. What he did next. Rebecca Miller took a deep breath before entering the courthouse, organizing the papers that proved her innocence in the lawsuit that threatened to destroy her 15-year career as an attorney. The accusation was serious: misappropriation of funds from an inheritance, filed by 72-year-old Mrs. Dorothy Wilson. When the courtroom door opened and she saw who occupied the judge's seat, her heart stopped for a few seconds. Michael Thompson, hair graying at the temples, the same well-groomed beard she had known when he was 25, held the gavel with the hand he had once used to caress her face. "Good morning," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, but Rebecca noticed the almost imperceptible tremor. 15 years had passed since their traumatic separation, when she discovered she was pregnant and he disappeared from her life without explanation. Now he was the judge responsible for deciding her professional future. "Your Honor," she murmured, lowering her eyes. Michael adjusted his glasses, a habit she remembered well. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the case files. "This court is now in session to hear the case filed by the plaintiff Dorothy Wilson against attorney Rebecca Miller," he announced, avoiding looking directly at her. In the audience, Rebecca noticed a young intern with brown hair and green eyes taking notes attentively. There was something familiar about that face, in the way she bit her pencil when concentrated. The accusation was clear. Rebecca had helped Mrs. Dorothy recover an inheritance of $200,000 that was in the possession of distant relatives in New York. According to the documents, she was alleged to have kept $40,000 of the amount, a sum the elderly woman claimed she never authorized. "Mrs. Rebecca Miller," called Michael, and she stood up. "Are you aware of the charges against you?" "I am, Your Honor, and I categorically deny all of them." Rebecca opened her briefcase and took out a series of documents, organized with meticulous care. Each paper had been reviewed dozens of times during the sleepless nights of the previous week. "Your Honor, here are the receipts signed by the plaintiff herself, authorizing the deduction of 20% from the recovered amount as agreed in our fee contract." Michael took the documents, but as soon as his eyes scanned the lines, his expression changed. There was something wrong there. "These documents," he hesitated, looking more closely, "appear to have been altered." Rebecca's heart raced. Altered? How? She had kept those papers in her personal safe herself. "I don't understand, Your Honor." The plaintiff's signature shows visible inconsistencies. The date was clearly overwritten. In the audience, a man of about 40 smiled discreetly. It was Bradley Wilson, Mrs. Dorothy's nephew and sole heir if she lost the case. He watched every move with calculated interest. Mrs. Dorothy, seated next to her caregiver, a 50-year-old woman named Margaret, seemed confused by the whole situation. "Attorney Miller," said the elderly woman in a fragile voice, "I don't remember signing anything authorizing such a high fee." Rebecca felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. How was that possible? She clearly remembered the day Mrs. Dorothy signed the documents in the presence of 2 witnesses. "Your Honor, I request a recess so I can present new evidence and clarify this situation." "Granted. We will have a 2-hour recess." Michael banged the gavel, but his eyes remained fixed on Rebecca for a few seconds longer than necessary. There was pain in that gaze, and also something she couldn't decipher. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. During the recess, Rebecca went to the courthouse library to review her digital files. The brown-haired intern appeared at the door, hesitant. "Excuse me, Attorney Miller?" "Yes?" "My name is Emily Parker. I'm an intern here at the courthouse. I've been following your case and noticed some strange things in the documents." Rebecca looked up, interested. "What kind of things?" "The handwriting of Mrs. Dorothy Wilson's signature on the original papers is different from what she normally uses. I've seen her signature in other cases here at the courthouse." "How do you know that?" "My job is to organize the files. Mrs. Dorothy has been here before, in a lawsuit against her own relatives over this same inheritance 2 years ago." Rebecca felt a spark of hope. If she could prove the documents were forged, she could get rid of the charges. Could you show me these other cases? Of course, but... Attorney Miller, can I ask you a personal question? Rebecca nodded, although a strange premonition came over her. Have you known Judge Michael for a long time? I noticed that you, well, seemed to know each other. Rebecca's heart raced. There was something in the way Emily asked the question, a curiosity that went beyond professional. Why do you ask? It's just that, well, I never knew my father. My mother always said he was an important man, a magistrate, but that circumstances separated us when I was a baby. Rebecca had to lean on the table. The physical resemblance she had noticed before made sense now. The green eyes, the shape of the face, even the way Emily gestured as she spoke. How old are you? 15. I'll be 16 in March. The math added up perfectly. Rebecca got pregnant with Michael 16 years ago, but lost contact with him when he disappeared mysteriously. She had to raise her daughter alone, making up excuses about the absent father. Emily, what's your mother's full name? Rebecca Miller. She's a lawyer, but she hasn't worked for a few years. Why are you asking that? The world spun around Rebecca. The intern who was helping her was her own daughter, working for the father she never knew. Emily, I need you to sit down. Why? You look pale. Because I have something very important to tell you. But before Rebecca could continue, the door opened and Michael entered the library. Seeing the two women together, he stopped as if he had seen a ghost. Sorry to interrupt, He hesitated, staring at Emily. Dad, murmured Emily, not understanding where that word came from. Michael had to lean against the doorframe. The resemblance was undeniable. It was like looking at a younger version of Rebecca, but with his own features mixed in. This can't be happening, he whispered. Michael, said Rebecca, slowly rising, we need to talk. Wait, you know each other? Emily looked from one to the other, confused. Emily, said Rebecca, her voice choked, this man is your father. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the footsteps of Margaret, Mrs. Dorothy's caregiver, who was passing through the hallway. She slowed her pace when she heard raised voices coming from the library. Michael slowly approached Emily, who had turned completely pale. How is this possible? He asked, directing the question both to Rebecca and to the universe. Michael, I tried to tell you back then. I sent letters, called, even went to your apartment, but you had disappeared. Letters? What letters? I never received any letters. Rebecca realized there was something wrong with this whole story. Michael seemed genuinely surprised. Your mother, she said, suddenly remembering. Your mother always answered the phone when I called. She said you were away on business trips. Michael Thompson ran his hand over his face, realizing something he had tried to forget for years. My mother, she never approved of our relationship. She said you weren't good enough for me. And you believed her? No. I never understood why you disappeared from my life so suddenly. One day we were planning our wedding, the next you were gone. Emily listened to the conversation as if in a dream. The life she knew was being rewritten before her eyes. Mom, she said, using the word for the first time with Rebecca. Why did you never tell me the truth? Because I thought he didn't want us. Your paternal grandmother convinced me it was better this way. My mother did that. Michael sank heavily into a chair. She intercepted your attempts to contact me. It seems so. And now, 15 years later, we find out in the worst possible way. The weight of the situation settled over all of them. Michael was the judge presiding over a case that could destroy the career of the woman he had never stopped loving, and he had just discovered he had a 15-year-old daughter. I need to recuse myself from this case, he said finally. Michael, don't do this for me. Do it because it's the right thing. And it is the right thing. I cannot preside over a case where I have a personal involvement. Emily, who had remained silent while taking it all in, finally spoke. Wait, if you're sorting this out now, who's going to help me understand why the documents in Mom's case file were altered? Rebecca and Michael looked at each other. In the midst of the emotional whirlwind, they had almost forgotten about the case. What altered documents? Asked Michael. Dad, Can I call you Dad? Emily hesitated. I found out that someone altered the documents Mom submitted. The signatures are forged. How do you know that? Because I saw Mrs. Dorothy Wilson's real signature on other case files. And what's more, I saw Margaret, her caregiver, tampering with the courthouse system last night. Margaret? Rebecca stood up. She has access to the system. She shouldn't, but I saw her using the clerk's computer after hours. I thought it was strange, but I didn't know what to do. Michael and Rebecca looked at each other again, this time with a growing mutual understanding. Do you think Margaret could have altered the documents? Asked Michael. It makes sense, said Rebecca. She has constant access to Mrs. Dorothy Wilson, knows her routine, and could easily forge signatures. But what would her motivation be? Money, answered Emily. Yesterday I overheard her on the phone talking about a gambling debt. She owed a lot of money to someone. The three fell silent, processing the information. If Margaret had indeed forged the documents, it meant Rebecca was innocent, and there was a much more complex conspiracy at play. We need proof, said Michael, but I can no longer be directly involved in this case. Dad, said Emily, testing the word again, can you ask another judge to take over the case? I can, and I will do that right now. Michael headed for the door but stopped and turned around. Rebecca, after all this is settled, we need to talk. We have 15 years to make up for. Rebecca nodded, feeling tears welling in her eyes. I know, and Michael, I never stopped loving you. He smiled for the first time since the hearing began. Neither did I. Emily watched the scene with a growing smile on her face. Finally, she would have a complete family, but the happiness was interrupted by the arrival of Bradley Wilson in the library. Sorry to interrupt this touching family moment, he said sarcastically, but you're making a very big mistake. What mistake? Asked Rebecca, immediately on the defensive. You think Margaret acted alone? Do you think all this is just about a few dollars from an inheritance? Michael stepped forward, placing himself between Bradley and the two women. What do you mean by that? I mean you have no idea what you're up against. My Aunt Dorothy isn't the fragile little old lady you think she is. What do you mean? She has early-stage Alzheimer's, but in her lucid moments she remembers things they'd prefer she forget forever. Rebecca felt a shiver run down her spine. What kind of things? Things about my uncle's death, her husband. Things about how he really lost his life. Bradley, said Michael in a warning tone, are you suggesting there were irregularities in the investigation of your uncle's bankruptcy? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating it clearly. My uncle didn't have a car accident, and my aunt knows that. The atmosphere in the library changed completely. What had started as a simple embezzlement case was turning into something far more sinister. Why are you telling us this? Asked Rebecca. Because Margaret isn't working alone. She's working for people who want to keep my aunt quiet forever, and using you as a scapegoat was part of the plan. Emily moved closer to her mother, feeling fear growing inside her. Mum, what is he talking about? Before Rebecca could answer, Margaret appeared at the library door. Her face, normally sweet and maternal, now showed a cold, calculated expression. Bradley, you should have kept quiet. Margaret, said Michael, trying to stay calm. What's going on here? What's going on is that you've discovered things you shouldn't have. Margaret locked the library door from the inside and leaned against it. No one is leaving here until we settle this once and for all. Rebecca instinctively pulled Emily closer, while Michael positioned himself in front of them. Margaret, you don't want to do this, he said in a calm but firm voice. I don't want to, but I have no choice. You have no idea what Mrs. Dorothy knows. If she starts talking, many important people will be in trouble. What important people? People who prefer to remain anonymous. People who paid very well to make her husband's accident look exactly like what it was supposed to be. An accident. Bradley moved away from Margaret, realizing he had underestimated the gravity of the situation. Margaret, I didn't know you were involved with these people. Of course you did, Bradley. You came to me because you knew I needed money. You offered $20,000 to keep your aunt medicated and confused. But that was just so she wouldn't question the inheritance. It was, until we discovered she had kept evidence about the true cause of her husband's departure. Michael took a step forward. What evidence? Letters, photos, documents that prove he uncovered a money laundering scheme involving several important people in the city, people who couldn't allow him to talk. Rebecca began to understand the scale of what was happening. And you forged the documents for my case to discredit me as a lawyer. That was the plan. If you were convicted of embezzlement, no one would believe anything you said later in case Mrs. Dorothy decided to seek your services again. But the plan went wrong, said Emily, finding courage in her voice, because we discovered the truth. You discovered part of the truth, but that won't help you if you don't leave here alive. The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Michael mentally calculated the distances between them and the door, looking for a way to protect Rebecca and Emily. Margaret, said Rebecca, you're not a bad person. You were put in a difficult situation. Don't try to convince me to do the right thing. It's too late for that. It's never too late. Yes, it is. Especially after I killed Mrs. Dorothy this morning. The shock of the revelation hit everyone like a lightning bolt. Bradley staggered, leaning against the wall. You did what? She woke up lucid today. She started asking for her attorney, saying she needed to tell the truth about her husband. I couldn't let that happen. Emily began to cry silently, while Rebecca held her tightly. How? Asked Michael in a hoarse voice. Medication overdose. It will look like an accident. An elderly woman with Alzheimer's who took too many pills out of confusion. But the doctors will find out. They won't. The medication leaves the system in a few hours, and I'm the only witness to what happened. Michael realized he needed to act fast. Margaret was clearly desperate, and desperate people were unpredictable. And what's your plan now? Kill all of us here in the courthouse? I don't know yet. I'm improvising. It was at that moment that Rebecca noticed something important. Margaret was nervous, sweating, constantly looking at her wristwatch. You're afraid, said Rebecca, not of us, but of the people you work for. Shut up! They said they would pay you, but they actually plan to get rid of you too, don't they? Margaret hesitated for a moment, confirming Rebecca's suspicions. You have 1 hour to leave the city, continued Rebecca. That's what they told you, wasn't it? How do you know that? Because that's how these people operate. They eliminate the evidence, including the people who worked for them. Emily took advantage of Margaret's moment of distraction and discreetly turned on the library's sound system, which was connected to the courthouse's general system. Everything being said, there was now being broadcast to all rooms in the building. You can still do the right thing, Margaret, said Michael. Help us catch these people, and we'll guarantee your protection. Protection? You have no idea who you're dealing with. Then tell us. Margaret hesitated again, but then seemed to make a decision. All right, but if I tell you everything, do you promise to help me get out of this city alive? We promise, said Michael. Outside the library, a crowd had gathered in the hallways, listening to every word through the speakers. Courthouse security guards were quietly approaching the door. It all started 3 years ago, said Margaret, when Mrs. Dorothy's husband, Mr. Vincent, discovered that his accounting firm was being used to launder money from some irregular activities. What kind of activities? Overpriced contracts with the city hall, rigged bids, nothing too sophisticated but a lot of money involved. Rebecca and Michael exchanged glances. Municipal corruption was serious, but it still didn't explain the level of violence involved. Vincent decided to report it. He gathered evidence for months, copies of contracts, bank records, recorded conversations. When he was ready to hand everything over to the authorities, they found out. And then? Then they planned the accident. A truck that lost its brakes on the highway. Nothing that could be traced back to them. Bradley interrupted, visibly shaken. My uncle was murdered? He was, and Mrs. Dorothy always knew. That's why she developed Alzheimer's so quickly. The shock, the trauma, the guilt for not being able to do anything. And the evidence he gathered? It's hidden in her house, in a safe that only she knows how to open. Michael realized the situation was much more complex than he had imagined. If this evidence really existed, it could expose a corruption scheme that would involve several influential people. Who are these people, Margaret? We need names. I only know my contact, A man named Attorney Sanders. He's the one who approached me. He's the one who pays me. Attorney Sanders? Rebecca paled. Sanders as in Mayor George Sanders. I can neither confirm nor deny that. But the silence that followed was confirmation enough. The mayor of the city was involved in the corruption scheme and the murder of Vincent Wilson. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing, it was then that the library door opened silently. 3 courthouse security guards entered discreetly, while Margaret had her back to the entrance. Michael made an almost imperceptible signal for them to remain silent. There was still more information to be extracted from Margaret. Margaret, where exactly is the evidence in Mrs. Dorothy Wilson's house? In his office, behind a family portrait, there's a safe built into the wall. And the combination? It's their wedding anniversary date, 03/15/1962. One of the guards took the opportunity to position himself better, but lightly bumped into a bookshelf. Margaret turned around quickly. "Did you call security?" she shouted, feeling betrayed. "We didn't call anyone," said Rebecca, "but everything you said was broadcast through the courthouse sound system." Margaret looked up and saw the microphone was on. Her expression changed from despair to total panic. "You don't know what you've done. Now they're going to kill us all." "Not if you cooperate with us," said one of the guards, identifying himself. "I'm Officer Brooks. You are in police custody." "Police custody won't protect me from these people." "Yes, it will if you hand over all the evidence you have." Margaret hesitated once more, but then sighed in defeat. "All right, but I want protection for my family too." "You can count on that." As Margaret was led away by the guards, Michael approached Rebecca and Emily. "Are you both all right?" "Physically, yes," answered Rebecca, "but this was all too intense." Emily, who had remained silent during Margaret's confession, finally spoke. "Dad, what happens now?" Michael smiled upon hearing the word Dad from his daughter for the first time. "Now we're going to get justice. For Mrs. Dorothy, for Mr. Vincent, and for your mother." "And for our family," added Rebecca, gathering the courage to express what she felt. "For our family," agreed Michael, taking her hand for the first time in 15 years. The 3 left the library together, but were immediately surrounded by journalists who had arrived at the courthouse after the accidental broadcast of Margaret's confession. "Attorney Michael, is it true the mayor is involved in the scheme?" "Attorney Rebecca, how does it feel to be cleared in such a dramatic way?" "Emily, what's it like to discover your parents work together at the courthouse?" Michael took control of the situation. "We'll hold a press conference in 1 hour. For now, we need to get organized." They managed to reach Michael's office, where they could finally speak with more privacy. "Rebecca," said Michael, "I'm so sorry for everything you went through alone all these years. Michael, we were both victims of your mother. She manipulated the situation to separate us." "Where is she now?" "She lives in Washington, D.C. with my brother. She's 82 years old, but she's still lucid enough to know what she did." Emily intervened. "Do you think she should know she met me?" Rebecca and Michael exchanged glances. It was a difficult question. "Emily," said Rebecca, "what do you want?" "I want to meet my grandmother. Even knowing what she did, she's family." Michael nodded slowly. "Then we'll arrange a meeting. But first we have to resolve this whole situation." In the following days, the city was swept up in a hurricane of revelations. The evidence found in Vincent Wilson's safe was even more damning than Margaret had suggested. In addition to the overpriced contracts, there was evidence of a scheme involving embezzlement of health and education funds, totaling over $2 million over 3 years. Mayor George Sanders was arrested, along with 5 other city employees and 2 local businessmen. Margaret, in exchange for her cooperation, was placed in a witness protection program. Bradley Wilson, initially suspected of involvement in the scheme, was cleared when it was proven that he truly didn't know the extent of Margaret's crimes. His only fault had been his greed for his aunt's inheritance. Rebecca had all charges against her dropped, but more than that, she became a sort of local heroine for helping expose municipal corruption. "Mom," said Emily, 2 weeks after the events unfolded, Are you going to go back to practicing law? I'm thinking about it. Maybe it's time to open my own office. And can I work with you as a real intern? Of course you can. But first you need to finish high school. Michael, who had joined them for dinner, smiled. She's right. Studies first, career later. Dad, you're sounding like a real father. I'm learning. 15 years late. But I'm learning. The family's life began to slowly normalize. Michael and Rebecca decided to take it slow, gradually regaining each other's trust. Emily divided her time between her mother's house and weekends with her father, but there was still one pending issue: Michael's mother. Rebecca, he said, 1 month after the events, my mother wants to talk to us. All of us? All of us. She wants to apologize. Rebecca hesitated. The hurt from 15 years didn't fade easily. Does she really want to apologize? Or does she just want to meet her granddaughter? I think both. But mostly, I think she wants to try to correct the mistake she made. Emily, who was listening to the conversation from the kitchen, approached. I would like to meet my grandma, even after everything. Rebecca sighed. It was hard to deny her daughter anything. All right. But on one condition, she comes here. We're not going to her. Michael agreed. Deep down, he also wanted his mother to take responsibility for what she had done. Mrs. Patricia Thompson arrived in town on a rainy Thursday in May. At 82 years old, she still maintained the haughty posture Rebecca remembered from their dating days, but her face showed the signs of someone who had carried guilt for a long time. The meeting was set in the living room of Rebecca's house. Emily insisted on preparing a special coffee for the occasion. Patricia, said Rebecca, opening the door, trying to keep her voice neutral. Rebecca, you look beautiful. The years have been kind to you. Thank you. Michael appeared behind Rebecca, and Mrs. Patricia smiled upon seeing her son. My dear son. Hi, Mom. Emily came down the stairs at that moment, carrying a tray with coffee and cookies. When Mrs. Patricia saw her, she froze. My God. She looks just like you, Michael, when you were a child. Grandma Patricia, said Emily hesitantly. Emily, my beautiful granddaughter. The two hugged, and Mrs. Patricia began to cry silently. Forgive me, she said. Forgive me for stealing 15 years of your lives. Rebecca, despite all the hurt, felt moved by the sincerity of the remorse. Patricia, why did you do that? Because I was a prejudiced fool who thought I knew what was best for my son. Because I was afraid of losing him to a woman I thought wasn't good enough. I would never have taken Michael from you. I know that now, but at the time, I only saw that you came from a simple family, that you didn't have the same privileges we did. I thought he would regret the marriage. Michael sat beside his mother. Mom, you almost destroyed our family because of prejudice. I know, son. And I've carried that guilt ever since. When you became depressed after the breakup, when you started drinking too much, when you isolated yourself from everyone, I knew I had done something terrible. Rebecca Miller remembered the rumors that had reached her at the time. Michael Thompson had indeed gone through a rough patch after the relationship ended. You suffered too, she said, more to herself than to him. I suffered a lot. I thought you had abandoned me because you didn't love me enough. And I thought you had rejected me because I wasn't good enough. Emily Parker watched the conversation with tears in her eyes. She could see how the misunderstanding had deeply hurt the three adults around her. Grandma, she said, you can try to fix this now. How, my dear? By helping Mom and Dad reconnect, by being the grandma I always wanted to have, by being part of our family. Mrs. Patricia Thompson smiled through her tears. Would you really forgive me after everything I caused? Grandma, I just found out I have a complete family. I won't waste that because of past mistakes. Rebecca Miller approached and sat next to Mrs. Patricia Thompson. Patricia, I forgive you too, but I want you to understand. If we stay together, you can never interfere in our relationship again. Never again. I promise. Michael Thompson took his mother's hand. Mom, I need you to understand one thing. Rebecca is the woman of my life. She always has been. She always will be. If you can't accept that, I accept, son. I completely accept. The dinner that followed was the first of many. Slowly, Mrs. Patricia Thompson was integrated into the family routine. She moved to a small apartment in the city, saying she wanted to be close to her granddaughter. Emily Parker flourished with her grandmother's attention. Mrs. Patricia Thompson, in turn, found in her granddaughter an opportunity for redemption. She taught her old recipes, told family stories, took her for walks on weekends. Rebecca Miller and Michael Thompson, on the other hand, carefully navigated the rekindling of their love. It wasn't easy to overcome 15 years of separation and hurt. "Michael," said Rebecca one night as they walked through the town square, "sometimes I feel like we're forcing something that should be natural. Do you regret trying?" "I don't regret it, but I'm afraid we're trying to recreate something that no longer exists." Michael stopped walking and turned to her. "Rebecca, I've changed a lot in these 15 years. You've changed too. We're not the same people who fell in love at 25 anymore." "Exactly, so maybe—" "But," he interrupted her, "maybe we can fall in love again, with the people we've become." Rebecca smiled for the first time since they had gotten back together. "Do you think that's possible?" "I think it's already happening." He kissed her there in the middle of the square, under the light of the old lampposts. It was different from the kisses of 15 years ago. It was more mature, more conscious, more valuable, because they knew what it meant to lose it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 6 months after the meeting at the courthouse, Rebecca opened her new law office. It was small but located downtown in a restored historic building. The first client was a surprise. The widow of another businessman who suspected her husband had not died of natural causes, but rather because he had discovered irregularities in municipal contracts. "Attorney Miller," said the woman, "my name is Evelyn Carter. My husband died 2 years ago in a very strange traffic accident." Rebecca felt a familiar chill. The story seemed to echo the case of Vincent Wilson. "Can you tell me more details?" He was an engineer and was auditing some public works when he started receiving threats. A week later, she lost control of her car on a curve she knew very well. "Did you keep any evidence of the irregularities he discovered?" "I kept everything. He told me to look for the attorney if anything happened to him." Rebecca realized the corruption scheme was bigger and older than they had imagined. Even with the mayor's arrest, there were still other people involved who hadn't been exposed. "Evelyn, I will help you, but I want you to know it could be dangerous. Counselor, they killed my husband. I have nothing to lose." That night, Rebecca told Michael about the new case. "Are you sure you want to get involved in this again?" "Michael, if there's justice to be served, I will serve it." "What if they try to intimidate you again?" "This time I'm not alone." He smiled and hugged her. "You'll never be alone again." Emily, who was now 16 and had become even more determined and courageous, joined the conversation. "Mom, I can help with the research. I'm learning about digital investigation at school." "Emily, this could be dangerous." "Dad, Mr. Vincent's family deserves justice, and Mrs. Evelyn's family too." Michael and Rebecca exchanged glances. Their daughter was becoming a woman with a very strong sense of justice. "All right," said Rebecca, "but only research, no field investigation. I promise." In the following weeks, the trio worked together to unearth the evidence that Evelyn's husband had collected. What they discovered was even more shocking than they expected. They weren't just 2 isolated cases. There were at least 5 businessmen who had lost their lives in accidents after discovering irregularities in public contracts over the last 10 years. "This is serial," said Michael. "Someone is systematically eliminating people who discover the corruption. And that someone is still active, even after the mayor's arrest," added Rebecca. Emily, working on her laptop, looked up. "Mom, Dad, I found something interesting." "What is it?" "All the accidents were investigated by the same detective, Detective Richard Davis." Michael and Rebecca were silent for a moment. "Emily," said Michael slowly, "are you sure about this?" "I am. Look here. Vincent Wilson, 2019, investigated by Detective Davis. Robert Carter, 2021, investigated by Detective Davis. Joseph Cooper, 2020, investigated by Detective Davis. And all the cases were closed as accidents, completed Rebecca. Exactly. The discovery changed everything. They weren't just dealing with municipal corruption, but with a scheme that also involved criminal investigation. "We need more evidence before making any accusations," said Michael. "I agree. But how do we get that evidence without raising suspicions?" It was Emily who had the idea. What if Evelyn went to the station as a concerned widow, asking to review her husband's case file? "That could work," said Rebecca. "She would have the legal right to access the case. And while she's there, she can observe how Davis reacts when she mentions suspicions about the accident." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "It's risky, but it might work." Evelyn agreed to the plan. She was determined to find out the truth about her husband's passing, even if it meant putting herself in danger. The following Monday, she walked into the station wearing black clothes and carrying the expression of a grieving widow. "Detective Davis, my name is Evelyn Carter. You investigated my husband Robert's accident 2 years ago." Richard Davis was a 50-year-old man with graying hair and small, calculating eyes. When he heard the name Robert Carter, Rebecca could see through the station window that he became tense. "Of course, Mrs. Carter. I'm very sorry for your loss. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to review some details of the investigation. I have some doubts that won't let me sleep." "What kind of doubts?" Evelyn followed the script they had prepared. Robert was very nervous in the weeks before the accident. He said he had discovered something important at work. He even mentioned being afraid of someone. Davis began sweating visibly. "Mrs. Carter, your husband had an accident. He lost control of the car on a dangerous curve. These things happen. But he knew that road very well, officer. He had driven there every day for years. The asphalt was wet. The report explains everything." Evelyn insisted, as they had agreed. "Officer, would it be possible for me to see that report again? And perhaps speak with the people who provided assistance? Mrs. Carter, you're reopening unnecessary wounds. Your husband had an accident. Accept that and move on with your life." The sharpness of the response confirmed Evelyn's suspicions. A competent officer would have shown more understanding toward a widow seeking answers. "Officer, I have the legal right to access the investigation documents." "Of course you do, but I need a few days to locate the files." "A few days?" "Yeah, a few days." Evelyn left the police station feeling she had gained valuable information. Davis was clearly nervous and trying to buy time. That night, the trio met to analyze what they had discovered. "He's definitely hiding something," said Evelyn. "The question is, what will he do now that he knows you suspect?" said Michael. "He'll probably try to intimidate you," replied Rebecca. "Or worse." "Or worse, what?" "Or he'll try to arrange an accident for you too." The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone knew Rebecca was right. "So what do we do?" asked Evelyn. "You'll stay home and won't go out alone," said Rebecca. "We'll take care of the rest." "And what is the rest?" "We'll get the evidence we need through other means." Michael leaned forward. "Rebecca, are you thinking of something specific?" "I'm thinking that maybe it's time to involve someone from outside. Someone who isn't compromised with the local scheme." "Like who?" "Like the federal prosecutor's office." Emily, who had remained quiet during the entire conversation, finally spoke. "Mom, I can help with that too." "How?" "I have a friend who lives in Washington, D.C. His father works at the federal prosecutor's office. I can talk to him." Rebecca hesitated. Involving her daughter further in that dangerous investigation didn't seem like a good idea. "Emily, I don't want you exposing yourself more." "Mum, it's not exposure. It's just an informal conversation to learn how the complaint process works." Michael supported his daughter. "Rebecca, she's right. Information is never too much." "All right, but only information." Emily smiled and picked up the phone. "I'll call Nathan right now." The conversation with Nathan was enlightening. His father, Attorney William Harrison, was a federal prosecutor specializing in crimes against public administration. "Emily," said Nathan, "Dad became very interested when I told him about the case. He wants to speak with your mother. Really? Yes, he said cases involving multiple victims and systematic corruption are a priority for the agency. Nathan, can your father help us? Yes, he can. But he needs solid evidence. We have evidence. Then schedule a meeting. Dad can see you next week. Rebecca, Michael, and Evelyn traveled to Washington, D.C. the following Thursday. Emily stayed with her grandmother, Patricia, who had insisted on caring for her granddaughter during her parents' absence. Attorney William Harrison's office was impressive. Located in one of the downtown buildings, it overlooked the National Mall and had walls covered with diplomas and certificates. "Attorney Harrison," said Rebecca, "thank you so much for seeing us." "Attorney, Rebecca, after what my daughter told me, I couldn't help but receive you all. You may have discovered something very important." Evelyn opened a folder and took out dozens of carefully organized documents. "Attorney Harrison, here is the evidence my husband collected before he passed away." William Harrison examined the documents with growing attention. "This is very serious. If this information is correct, we're looking at a money laundering scheme that may have moved more than $10 million. "And that's just the tip of the iceberg," said Michael. "We suspect several people were eliminated to keep the scheme running." "Do you have evidence of these eliminations?" Rebecca presented the analysis that Emily had done of the accidents investigated by Detective Davis. "This is circumstantial but very suggestive," said William after reviewing the data, "especially considering that all the victims had discovered irregularities related to the same corruption scheme." "Attorney Harrison, what can we do?" "First, you're going to give me copies of all this. Second, I'm going to open a confidential inquiry to investigate both the corruption and the homicides." "And how long could that take?" "If the evidence checks out, I could have arrest warrants in 2 weeks." Evelyn began to cry with relief. "Attorney Harrison, does this mean there will be justice for my Robert?" "It means we will do everything in our power to ensure there is justice." On the trip back home, the trio was more optimistic than they had been in weeks. "Rebecca," said Michael, "do you realize we just set in motion something much bigger than we imagined?" "I do. And I'm both scared and proud at the same time." "Why scared?" "Because we still have to go back home and live with people who could be dangerous until they're arrested." "And why proud?" "Because our daughter grew up watching her parents fight for justice. That will mark her life in a positive way." Evelyn, in the back seat, smiled. "You know you're an amazing family, right?" "We're learning to be a family," replied Michael. "And it's working," added Rebecca, taking his hand. When they got home, they found Emily and Mrs. Patricia preparing a special dinner. "How was the trip?" asked Emily, hugging her parents. "It was very good. Attorney Harrison is going to help us," said Rebecca. "And did he find the evidence convincing?" "Very convincing." Mrs. Patricia approached the group. "Rebecca, can I speak with you for a moment?" Rebecca stepped aside with her mother-in-law, curious about what she wanted to talk about. "Rebecca, I want you to know that I am very proud of you." "Thank you, Patricia. When I met you 17 years ago, I thought you weren't good enough for my son. Now I realize my son wasn't good enough for you." Rebecca was surprised by the statement. "Patricia, you don't have to say that." "Yes, I do. You raised a wonderful daughter on your own. You built a respectable career, and now you're risking your safety to get justice for people you don't even know. You are an extraordinary woman. Patricia, and I want to apologize again for interfering with your happiness. If I could turn back time, but you can't. And maybe that's for the best." "How so?" "If we hadn't separated, I wouldn't have become the woman I am today. Michael wouldn't have become the man he is today. And Emily wouldn't exist exactly as she is." Mrs. Patricia smiled through her tears. "You were always wise. I was just too blind to see it." The two women hugged, finally at peace with each other. The dinner was cheerful, but everyone knew the next few days would be tense as they awaited developments in the federal investigation. 2 days later, things began to get complicated. Evelyn called Rebecca at 7 in the morning, visibly shaken. "Rebecca, someone broke into my house last night." "What do you mean broke in?" "They didn't take anything valuable, but they ransacked my office. They were looking for something specific." "The evidence?" "Fortunately, I had stored everything in a bank vault, as you suggested. but they know I have something. Evelyn, you can't stay alone. I've already thought about that. I'm going to my sister's house in another city. That's the best decision. After hanging up, Rebecca told Michael about the break-in. This confirms our suspicions, he said. They're desperate, and when desperate people get even more desperate, they do unthinkable things. Are you scared? I am, especially for Emily. Rebecca, maybe we should send Emily and my mother away until this passes. I've already thought about that. But Emily will resist. Let me talk to her. That night, Michael talked to his daughter about the possibility of her spending a few weeks with relatives in another state. Dad, I'm not abandoning you now. Emily, it's not abandonment, it's precaution. If you stay, I stay. Daughter. Dad, I'm 16 years old. I'm not a child anymore, and we're a family. Families go through hardships together. Michael felt immense pride in his daughter, but also a growing fear. What if something happens to you, and what if something happens to you? Do you think I could live knowing I ran away when you needed me most? Rebecca, who was listening to the conversation from the hallway, entered the room. Emily is right. We're a family. We'll face this together. But we'll take every possible precaution, said Michael. I agree. In the following days, they established a strict security routine. Nobody went out alone. Rebecca cancelled some professional appointments. Michael started working more from home. It was then that they received the call from attorney William Harrison. Attorney Rebecca Miller, we have good news. What news? We obtained arrest warrants for 7 people, including Detective Davis and 2 local businessmen. When will the arrests happen? Tomorrow morning, simultaneously. Attorney Harrison, I need to ask, are you sure you've identified everyone involved? We never have absolute certainty in these cases, but we believe we got the main ones. And if there are others, we hope the arrested people will cooperate with the investigations and help us identify other participants. Rebecca hung up the phone with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was relieved that justice would finally be served. On the other, she still feared retaliation. The next morning, the whole town woke up to the news of the arrests. 7 people had been detained by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, accused of forming a criminal organization, corruption, money laundering, and homicide. Detective Richard Davis was arrested at his own home, trying to destroy documents in the backyard. 2 businessmen were arrested in their offices. Other public employees were detained at their residences. The impact was immediate. Newspapers across the state reported the case. The small town became the center of national attention. Mom, said Emily, watching the news, you did it. You really managed to bring justice. We succeeded because we worked together, replied Rebecca. You, me, your father, Evelyn, even your grandmother Patricia helped. It's true, said Patricia. I took care of the house so you could focus on the investigation. Michael hugged the whole family. Now we can finally breathe easy, but the peace didn't last long. 2 days after the arrests, Rebecca received a threatening call. Attorney Rebecca Miller? Who's speaking? Someone who didn't like your recent activities. What do you want? I want you to stop meddling where you shouldn't. The responsible people have already been arrested. Not all of them, counselor. Not all of them. The call disconnected, leaving Rebecca with a terrible feeling in her stomach. She immediately called attorney William Harrison to report the threat. Attorney Miller, we'll arrange protection for you immediately. Attorney Harrison, does this mean there are really still people involved who are free? Unfortunately, that's possible. Schemes like this tend to have branches that we only discover over time. And now you'll remain under protection while we continue investigating. The protection arrived in the form of 2 federal agents who discreetly stationed themselves in the neighborhood. Rebecca, Michael, and Emily had to adjust their routine once again to this new reality. Dad, said Emily a week later, do you think our lives will ever go back to normal? They will, sweetheart. It might take time, but they will. And when they do, are you going to get married? The question took Michael and Rebecca by surprise. They had talked about the future, but hadn't made any definite decisions yet. Emily, said Rebecca, why do you ask that? Because you love each other. Because I want a complete family. And because after everything we've been through together, I think we deserve a happy ending." Michael and Rebecca looked at each other and laughed. "She's right," said Michael. "We do deserve a happy ending." "What about the marriage?" insisted Emily. "Emily," said Rebecca, "your father hasn't asked me to marry him yet." Michael stood up, went to the bedroom and returned with a small velvet box. "Actually, I was waiting for the right moment." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Michael, Rebecca Miller, will you marry me? Again? Again?" "Yes, because deep in my heart, I never stopped being married to you." Emily began to cry with emotion, as did Mrs. Patricia, who was watching from the kitchen. "Yes," said Rebecca, also crying, "I will marry you. Again." The ring was simple but perfect. Michael had bought it weeks ago, waiting for the ideal time to offer it. "When will the wedding be?" asked Emily, hugging her parents. "When this whole situation is resolved," said Michael, "I want it to be a completely happy day without any worries." The resolution came a month later. The federal investigations discovered that the corruption scheme extended beyond the city, involving business people and politicians from 3 neighboring towns. In total, 15 people were arrested. Over $12 million were recovered and allocated to the public treasury. The victims' families received significant compensation. Evelyn Carter was finally able to give her husband a dignified burial, knowing his passing had been avenged. The other victims' relatives also found peace, knowing that justice had been served. Detective Richard Davis, during his trial, confessed to having participated in the cover-up of 5 homicides over 8 years. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Rebecca became one of the most respected attorneys in the state, known for her courage and integrity. Her practice grew, and she began taking cases from all over the country. Michael was promoted to appellate judge in recognition of his ethical conduct throughout the process. He became a reference in the fight against corruption in the judiciary. Emily, inspired by the experience, decided to pursue a legal career. She wanted to specialize in human rights and combating corruption. Mrs. Patricia became the most dedicated grandmother in the world, making up for the lost years with redoubled affection for her granddaughter. The wedding was scheduled for December, 6 months after the investigations concluded. It would be a simple ceremony, but full of meaning. "Mom," said Emily 2 weeks before the wedding, "can I give a speech at the ceremony?" "Of course, sweetheart. What do you want to say?" "I want to talk about how sometimes what seems like the end is actually the beginning. How the process that could have destroyed our family actually brought it back together." "That's a beautiful thought. And I want to talk about how true love always finds a way to win, even when everything seems lost." Rebecca Miller hugged her daughter, moved. "You've grown so much these past months. We've all grown, Mom, and we've grown together." The wedding day was perfect. The sun was shining, not a cloud in the sky. The ceremony took place at the church where Michael Thompson and Rebecca Miller had planned to get married 16 years earlier. Evelyn Carter was one of the bridesmaids. Attorney William Harrison came especially from Washington, D.C. for the ceremony. Even Nathan, his son, and Emily's friend attended. When it was time for Emily's speech, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. "A few months ago, my mother walked into a courthouse thinking her career might be over. My father found himself forced to judge the woman he had never stopped loving. I discovered that the intern working for my father was actually his daughter." The audience smiled, remembering the unusual situation. What could have been a tragedy became the greatest gift of our lives. We discovered we are stronger together than apart. We discovered that true love doesn't fade away. It just waits for the right moment to blossom again. Rebecca and Michael looked at each other, holding hands before the altar. "Mom, Dad, thank you for teaching me that it's worth fighting for what's right, that it's worth risking everything for justice, and that it's worth waiting for true love." The church erupted in applause. Michael kissed Rebecca, and for the first time in 16 years, they were officially husband and wife again. At the reception, Evelyn approached the family. "Rebecca, I will never be able to thank you enough for everything you've done." "Evelyn, we did it together. Your courage was essential for justice to be served." "And now? What happens now?" "Now we live our lives," said Michael. with gratitude for having a second chance, and with the peace of mind of having done the right thing, added Rebecca. Emily joined the group, and with the certainty that no matter what happens, we will face it together. The party continued late into the night. There was music, dancing, laughter, and a lot of emotion. It was the celebration not just of a wedding, but of a family that had found its way back to each other against all odds. During the last dance of the night, Michael and Rebecca moved slowly in the center of the dance floor, watched by their daughter and his mother. "Rebecca," said Michael, "can you believe we made it this far? Sometimes it feels like a dream. If it is a dream, I hope I never wake up." "Michael, what do you think awaits us in the coming years?" "I think a life that is both normal and extraordinary awaits us. Normal because we will live like any other family. Extraordinary because we know the value of every moment together." "And Emily?" "Emily will grow up knowing she can always count on us. And one day, when she has her own family, she will tell her children the story of how her grandparents found each other again in a courthouse." Rebecca smiled. "That's a beautiful story to tell. It's our story." The music ended, but they remained embraced for a few more seconds, savoring the moment. "Mom, Dad," said Emily, approaching, "it's time for you to go on your honeymoon." "Emily, are you sure you'll be all right with your grandma?" "Mom, I'm 16 and a half. I'll be just fine." Mrs. Patricia Thompson joined the group. "Rebecca, you can go in peace. I will take care of my granddaughter, as if she were a treasure." "That's how she should be treated," said Michael, kissing his daughter on the forehead. "Go on now," said Emily, pushing her parents toward the exit, "or you'll miss your flight." Michael and Rebecca left for a simple but perfect honeymoon, a week at an inn in the mountains, far from courthouses, lawsuits, and worries. On the last day of the trip, they walked to a lookout point that offered a panoramic view of the region. "Michael," said Rebecca, "do you regret anything?" "I regret the 15 years we lost together, but I don't regret the path that brought us back to each other." "Neither do I." "And you? Do you regret anything?" "I regret having doubted your love back then, but I don't regret raising Emily alone, because that made me the woman I am today. The woman I fell in love with again." "What do you mean again?" "Rebecca, I fell in love with the 25-year-old girl 17 years ago, and I fell in love with the 42-year-old woman a few months ago. They're two different loves, but equally intense. And I fell in love with the ambitious 27-year-old young man 17 years ago, and I fell in love with the honorable 44-year-old man a few months ago." They fell silent, contemplating the view and reflecting on the long road they had traveled. "Michael, do you think our story can inspire other people?" "I think our story proves that it's never too late to start over, that true love withstands time and circumstances, and that justice, no matter how long it takes, always gets done in the end." "Exactly." Rebecca took her husband's hand. "I'm ready to go home, to our new life together." When they returned from their honeymoon, they found Emily and Mrs. Patricia organizing family photo albums. There were old photos of young Michael and Rebecca, pictures of baby Emily, and recent wedding photos. "Mom, Dad," said Emily, "look what Grandma and I made." The album told the whole family story, from Michael and Rebecca's first meeting to the recent wedding. "Emily, this is beautiful," said Rebecca, flipping through the pages. "I want our children and grandchildren to know our whole story." "Our children and grandchildren? Well, don't you think I'll want little siblings?" Michael and Rebecca laughed. "Emily, you're 16 and a half. Isn't it a bit early to be thinking about siblings? It's never too early to plan for a big, happy family." Mrs. Patricia smiled. "She's right. Big families are more fun." "Grandma, you support me?" "I absolutely support you." Rebecca and Michael exchanged amused glances, entertained by the conspiracy between daughter and grandmother. "Well," said Rebecca, "let's see what the future holds." "The future holds much happiness for us," said Michael, "that I can guarantee." And he was right. In the following years, the family grew and prospered. Emily graduated from law school with honors, specializing in human rights as she had planned. Michael became president of the state Supreme Court. Rebecca expanded her firm, becoming one of the most respected attorneys in the country. Mrs. Patricia lived to see the birth of her first grandchild, a boy named Vincent, in honor of the man whose departure had changed their lives. She passed away peacefully at 88, surrounded by the entire family she had helped reunite. Evelyn Carter became a great friend of the family. She remarried and opened an NGO to help families of violence victims. Her work was inspired by the fight for justice she had waged alongside Rebecca. Attorney William Harrison continued as a federal prosecutor and specialized in corruption cases. He and Michael maintained a friendship that lasted decades, based on mutual respect and a shared passion for justice. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of love, justice, and reunion? Tell us how you felt following the journey of Rebecca, Michael, and Emily. Leave your honest comment about which moment moved you the most. And don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.